In the quiet streets of Wichita, Kansas, life often moved at a measured pace, with a sense of comfort and familiarity woven into the fabric of everyday life. Neighbors knew each other, parents felt secure letting their children play outside, and residents went to bed with their doors unlocked. Yet beneath this tranquil exterior, a malignant force had already taken root. On the surface, Dennis Rader was a man who represented the values of this close-knit community, an upstanding family man, a church leader, a dedicated employee. But as the year 1974 dawned, Wichita was about to witness a wave of terror that would lay bare the dark realities hiding behind familiar faces. On the morning of January 15, 1974, Wichita police received a call that would mark the beginning of a nightmare for the city. Officers arrived at the Otero family home to find a scene that would haunt them for years. Joseph and Julie Otero, along with their two children, 11-year-old Josephine and 9-year-old Joseph Jr., were discovered brutally murdered in their own home. Each family member was found bound, with signs of torture and a methodical cruelty that sent chills down the spine of even the most seasoned detectives. It was clear from the start that this was not an ordinary crime. The violence was excessive, calculated, and deeply personal. Wichita residents, hearing of the Otero murders, felt an immediate shift in the air. Word spread quickly, with neighbors huddling together, trying to make sense of it. Who could have done such a thing? And why? The brutality of the murders made it seem like a personal vendetta, but as the days passed, detectives found no connections to any known suspects. The randomness of the crime was perhaps the most unsettling detail. The Oteros were a loving family, known and respected within the community, with no enemies to speak of. For months, police were left without any significant leads. They combed through evidence, interviewed neighbors, and worked tirelessly to uncover the motive behind the Otero killings, but to no avail. It seemed as if the killer had vanished without a trace, leaving a city paralyzed with fear. It wasn't long before residents began locking their doors at night, an unusual practice in this small, trusting town. Friends stopped visiting each other without warning, and every stranger became a potential threat. Then, in October of that same year, the Wichita Eagle newspaper received an anonymous letter that would forever change the case. It was a taunting confession written in chilling detail, describing how the author had meticulously planned and executed the Otero murders. The writer signed the letter BTK, an acronym for bind, torture, kill, detailing a sadistic ritual that he claimed as his own. This wasn't a message from an ordinary criminal, it was the work of a man who took pleasure in instilling fear and pain. In a tone disturbingly calm and emotionless, he outlined his twisted methods and intentions. With this letter, the unknown predator made it clear that he wanted credit for his work, that he was proud of the terror he had sown. The city's reaction to the BTK letter was one of shock and dread. Suddenly, the police realized that they were dealing with someone who was more than just a brutal killer. He was a manipulative monster who wanted to be known, to be feared, and to assert his dominance over not just his victims but the entire city. The BTK killer's letter transformed the Otero case from an isolated family tragedy into a horrifying cat and mouse game between the city and an unseen predator. As residents braced themselves for more violence, few could imagine that the killer could be someone they knew. A man with a family, a job, a man who walked among them without suspicion. Dennis Rader, who had chosen the name BTK, thrived on the fear he generated. In his daily life, Rader was the image of a respectable citizen. Born in Wichita in 1945, he grew up in a strict household, raised with the values of hard work and discipline. After graduating from high school, he joined the U.S. Air Force, serving his country and adding to his aura of respectability. Upon returning to Wichita, Rader married and had children, embodying the role of a family man. He worked as a compliance officer and later took up a position at ATT, a home security company, a job that would give him unparalleled access to the homes and lives of Wichita's residents. Rader's job involved selling security systems to families, helping them feel safe, all the while harboring dark fantasies of violating the very sanctity he was paid to protect. In 1977, after a few years of silence, BTK struck again, claiming the life of Shirley Vian. She was a mother of 3 young children, and on a seemingly ordinary day, Rader forced his way into her home. He separated her from her children, binding and torturing her before finally killing her. Shirley's children were left traumatized, carrying the weight of that horror for the rest of their lives. Once again, the brutality of the crime stunned Wichita. But for Rader, the experience went beyond mere violence. It was a ritualistic expression of control, his way of asserting power over life and death. After the murder of Shirley Vian, Rader continued his secret life, moving seamlessly between his family obligations, his work, and his position in the church. To those who knew him, he was the embodiment of normalcy, a quiet, reliable man who loved his family and took pride in his responsibilities. He served in leadership roles at his church and even became a Cub Scout leader, guiding young boys and setting an example for the community. But behind closed doors, Rader's inner world was one of sadistic fantasies and carefully calculated plans for his next project, as he called his murders. In 1978, BTK sent another letter, this time to Cake TV, a local television station, claiming responsibility for several murders and mocking the police for their inability to catch him. The letter was an elaborate taunt, filled with gruesome details only the killer would know. He toyed with law enforcement, dropping hints and riddles while skillfully avoiding any incriminating evidence. Rader was thrilled by the public's reaction to his taunts. He knew he held the city's attention, and he relished the idea of everyone living in fear, knowing he could strike at any time. The entire city of Wichita was his captive audience. For years, Rader managed to suppress his homicidal urges, blending back into everyday life. He became increasingly active in the local Lutheran church, serving as president of the congregation, a role that further cemented his position as a pillar of the community. His sense of superiority grew as he remained undetected, his dual life continuing unchallenged. But in 1985, BTK resurfaced to commit another murder. This time, his victim was Maureen Hedge, a 53-year-old widow who lived only a few doors away from Rader. The close proximity added a disturbing new layer to the case. The killer could be anyone's neighbor, even a friend. Hedge was found strangled, bound, and left in a degrading position, another victim claimed by Rader's ritualistic fantasies. The community was once again plunged into terror, realizing that the BTK killer could be someone they interacted with daily. Over the next few years, Rader's killings would continue sporadically, with each act of violence deepening his control over the city's psyche. His final known victim, Dolores Davis, was murdered in 1991. For the next decade, the BTK killer vanished from public view. Wichita residents hoped he had left the area, or perhaps had died. But for Rader, this was simply a period of restraint, a time to focus on his family, his work, and his community roles, all the while knowing that he could return to his projects whenever he wished. By 2004, the BTK killer was nearly forgotten, a dark chapter in Wichita's history that seemed to fade with time. But Rader's need for recognition simmered beneath the surface, and he began to crave the attention once more. He sent another letter to a local newspaper, resuming his taunts and challenging the police to catch him. This time, however, advances in forensic technology would be his undoing. In an act of arrogance, Rader sent a floppy disk to the police, confident they would find nothing on it that could trace back to him. But digital forensics revealed a hidden clue, linking the disk to a computer at the Christ Lutheran Church, where Dennis Rader served as president. After decades of evading capture, Dennis Rader was arrested in 2005. His confession was chilling, a cold recounting of each murder with a disturbing lack of remorse. The respectable family man, the community leader, and the churchgoer was revealed to be a sadistic killer who had terrorized Wichita for over 30 years. His dual life shattered the illusions of safety and trust that the community had once held dear, leaving a legacy of fear that would haunt Wichita for generations. The arrest of Dennis Rader shocked the nation. Media outlets descended upon Wichita, broadcasting the unimaginable details of the BTK killer's double life. For those who had known Rader personally, the revelation was unfathomable. Friends, neighbors, and colleagues struggled to reconcile the mild-mannered man they knew with the monster who had terrorized their community. The members of Christ Lutheran Church, where Rader had been a respected leader, were devastated. Many of them remembered his comforting words, his dedication to the congregation, his involvement with the youth groups. They had no idea that the man leading their prayers was also writing letters to the police and media, relishing the power he held over an entire city. As Rader sat in police custody, he began to reveal the twisted motivations behind his crimes in disturbing detail. Investigators and forensic psychologists were eager to understand what drove him, hoping that his insights might prevent future horrors. Rader described his fantasies with an unsettling calm, explaining how he had carefully planned each murder, selecting his victims, stalking them, and fantasizing about the power he would exert over them. He referred to his victims as projects, reducing their humanity to mere objectives in his dark quest for control. Forensic psychologist Dr. Catherine Ramsland, who interviewed Rader extensively after his capture, described him as exhibiting a classic case of narcissistic personality disorder combined with sadistic tendencies. Rader's need for control, His obsession with power and his callous disregard for human life were defining features of his personality. The contrast between his public persona and his private darkness suggested a deep and terrifying compartmentalization, a skill that allowed him to continue his crimes undetected for so long. He spoke openly about the satisfaction he felt when binding and torturing his victims, the twisted pleasure he derived from exerting control over their lives. For Rader, the violence was an expression of his dominance, a grotesque means of affirming his superiority over others. As Rader recounted each of his murders, he displayed a disturbing level of detail and precision, remembering aspects of the crimes that only the killer would know. Detectives, who had long wondered about the methods and motives behind the BTK killings, were horrified by the satisfaction he took in his actions. His recollections weren't marked by remorse or regret, but by a chilling pride. To him, the murders were accomplishments, milestones in his hidden life as the BTK killer. When the case went to trial, Wichita's residents and the families of Rader's victims braced themselves for what would undoubtedly be an emotionally excruciating experience. Rader chose to represent himself initially, relishing the opportunity to address the court and command attention. He methodically recounted each murder in a dispassionate tone, describing the planning, the stalking, and the methods he used with a horrifying lack of emotion. Rader's testimonies forced the families of his victims to relive their trauma, and his matter-of-fact descriptions of his crimes shocked everyone in the courtroom. When he finally pleaded guilty, Rader's accounts underscored the depth of his depravity, cementing his place as one of the most notorious killers in American history. Wichita, scarred by decades of fear and grief, was left to grapple with the trauma Rader had inflicted. Residents struggled with the memories of an era when they had lived under a constant, oppressive shadow, wondering if the killer might strike again. For many, Rader's capture brought a sense of relief but also a lingering sadness, as they realized the extent to which he had damaged the community's fabric of trust. Neighborhoods that once felt safe and secure had been forced to confront the uncomfortable reality that evil could hide behind the most unsuspecting faces. Families who had known Rader, who had trusted him as a neighbor and a friend, were left questioning their own judgment, feeling betrayed by the man they had thought was a friend. The Otero family, whose brutal murder had marked the beginning of Rader's killing spree, became a symbol of the BTK killer's cruelty and the community's grief. Surviving family members, who had endured decades of pain and loss, were now forced to relive the horror as Rader recounted the details of that tragic January morning in 1974. The youngest Otero children, who had managed to survive that day, grew up with the trauma of having their family destroyed. In public statements, they expressed a mixture of relief at Rader's capture and anger at the senselessness of his actions. For other survivors, like the children of Shirley Vian, Rader's trial forced them to confront memories they had tried to bury. Shirley's children, who had been home the day Rader killed their mother, spoke of the nightmares and the trauma they had carried into adulthood. Rader's cold descriptions of their mother's murder deepened their wounds, but they also drew strength from each other and from the community's support. The residents of Wichita rallied around the victims' families, attending vigils, holding fundraisers, and creating memorials to honor the lives that Rader had taken. In the years following Rader's capture, Wichita took steps to heal and move forward. The community strengthened its neighborhood watch programs and implemented educational initiatives on crime prevention and safety. Memorials and scholarships were established in honor of the victims, ensuring that their lives would be remembered as more than just names in a list of BTK's projects for the families affected. The community's support offered a small but meaningful source of comfort in the face of their losses. Despite the steps toward healing, the legacy of the BTK killer left an indelible mark on Wichita. The chilling reality of Rader's double life, the way he hid in plain sight, the way he exploited his position of trust, served as a stark reminder of the hidden darkness that could exist in any community. Schools and organizations used his story as a cautionary tale, emphasizing vigilance and awareness, even in seemingly safe places. Today, Rader remains imprisoned, serving 10 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. His story continues to captivate the public, not out of fascination with his crimes, but as a haunting reminder of the depths of human depravity and the resilience of those who endure unspeakable loss. The families of his victims and the residents of Wichita have worked to reclaim their city from the shadow of his actions, building a community grounded in strength, vigilance, and a commitment to one another's safety. For Wichita, the story of Dennis Rader, the BTK killer, is both a reminder and a lesson. His crimes may have stolen lives and shattered families, but the community's response, the unity, the support, and the strength they found in each other serves as a testament to resilience. They refused to let his actions define them, choosing instead to honor the memories of those he took away and to protect the values he tried to destroy. In the face of unimaginable darkness, Wichita found light in each other, a legacy that endures far beyond the twisted infamy of Dennis Rader. In the end, Dennis Rader's capture did not bring full closure to his victims' families or to the people of Wichita. His ability to blend in, to manipulate those around him, and to evade capture for so long left an indelible mark on the city. The realization that evil could hide behind such an ordinary face forced Wichita to confront the uncomfortable truth that monsters do not always look the part.